All right, I wanted to get more into the topics of scales and keys and intervals and chords and how they all relate together and how they all tie to one another. So, a quick review: a key is the blueprint of notes that we will predominantly use in a song or in a section. So, if I said I was in the key of C, I know that I'd be using all white notes and no black notes. So those are all the 8 notes of the key of C. Really, there's only 7, and then C repeats, right? So it's all of these white notes as far as it wants to go, right? And then if I were in the key of A flat, I would be using an A flat and a B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, G, A flat. So now I've got a different set of notes. These 5 and those 2, and then it starts all over again with A flat, and then those 2, and it just keeps going, pattern and pattern. Okay, so a key is just the blueprint of the notes that I am going to be using, right? So a scale then is built on a key where it goes from the first note of the key up through the same note an octave higher and then back down again. So in the key of C, for instance, if I'm using those 8 notes, a scale would look like this. And you might have heard that in a choir. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. You know, they sing that quite a lot, right? That's one of the exercises. So that's a scale. That's a C scale. And then a flat scale, for instance, would use the notes in the key of A flat. So it would look like this. Right? So that's a scale going from the first note, which is also called the tonic or do, up through the same note an octave higher, which is still tonic or do, and then back down, using all the notes of the scale. All right? So what I really want to get into in this video is the topic of intervals, and understanding scales is very important when it comes to intervals, because that's where we get the naming of the intervals. So an interval is the distance between 2 notes. So if I said from C to E, what is the distance between C and E? Like, what do we call that? I mean, it's kind of hard to quantify. Like, I could say, okay, well, it's 2 black notes and a white note away. Well, yeah, but from here to here is the same distance as from there to there, F sharp to A sharp, right? So these are the same distance. So it's like it doesn't always work, because in this case, that would be 2 white notes and 1 black note. You can do it with using the terminology of half steps and whole steps. Like if you look at these 2 notes, you can tell that it's 1 whole step, 2 whole steps. So this is 2 whole steps away. But that gets kind of cumbersome because we talk about, okay, well, what do you call that then? Let's see, 1, 2, 3. That's 3.5 steps. Well, it's not very easy to use that kind of terminology. So what we use instead is the major western scale, like we just talked about. And what we do is we number all these notes: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so now from 1 to 2 we call a second, and from 1 to 3 we call a third, and from 1 to 4 we call a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, and a seventh, and an octave or an eighth. Okay? It's important because I'm in C right now, right? The key of C. So if I did the distance between here, you can hear what it sounds like. I could do the same thing in A flat and although it's using different notes, all of the distances are the same. So relative to each other, the notes are it's going to sound like the same thing. So have a listen. All right, it's the same concept that allows us to put one song into any of the 12 different keys that we want to put it into. So if I had Joy to the World, I could play it in C, or I could play it in A flat. While absolutely the notes are different, relatively they're the same. It's the same distance between the starting note and the second note, and then the third note and the fourth note, and so on. So we use this number system to identify these intervals. So again, it's just based on the scales: second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and an octave or an eighth. Okay, so there are different qualities to these scales, because what this does, okay, this allows us to use those 8 notes as within the terminology, we could say from a first through a seventh and then an octave. All of that's fine, but then what about these black notes? What about all those nice juicy black notes in the middle? What do we do with those? I mean, we've already used all the numbers between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, that's where we have to get into the different qualities of intervals, which are major, minor, perfect, augmented, and diminished. So let me write that out for you here on the screen. So we have major, minor, perfect, augmented, and diminished. We're not going to talk about augmented and diminished for right now. I just wanted to sort of plant a seed and get you to be aware that they exist. Right now, what we're going to talk about is major, minor, and perfect. So all of the intervals that we just talked about that are true to the scale, so for instance in C, all white notes, right? A second, a third, a fourth, a fifth, sixth, seventh, and then an eighth or an octave. All of those are either major or perfect. So let's talk about what the perfect ones are, and then we'll go into the major ones. The ones that are called perfect are a fourth and a fifth and the octave. All right, so let me write that down for you. Right, so a fourth and a fifth and an octave are all referred to as perfect. At least, as they relate to the scale. So from the first note in the scale to the fourth note in the scale, that's a perfect fourth. And this is where we get into that augmented and diminished stuff. I mean, you could technically, you could put an F sharp there, but that's no longer perfect. Now we would call that an augmented fourth, but we'll get into that later, so don't worry about that for right now. But if it's true to the scale that you're talking about, that would be a perfect fourth. And C to F, no matter what key you're in, is always a perfect fourth. C to the next F. This is a perfect fourth. And that's a perfect fourth. And that's a perfect fourth. Okay? So fourth, a fifth, and an octave are all perfect intervals. Now, that leaves the rest of them in C to be major. So a second, a third, a sixth, and a seventh, we're all going to call major intervals. All right, so your major intervals are going to be a second, a third, a sixth, and a seventh. Let me get this green line out of our way here. There we go. A second, a third, a sixth, and a seventh. Okay, so if I'm in C, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, octave. The fourth and the fifth are perfect, and the octave is perfect, and the rest of these are major. And we'll talk about why it's perfect later. So, and not major, perfect and not major. So, So now that we have established sort of a baseline of what we're going to call what is true to the scale, the next thing we're going to do is talk about what a minor interval would be. And a minor interval is going to be something that deviates from the original scale that we're talking about. So if I'm in C, there's no black notes, right? But if I wanted to describe a black note, let's say I go from here, this is a major third. 1, 2, 3. It's a major third. And by the way, when you're counting your intervals, always count the first note also. Count the first note as 1. 1, 2, 3. Okay? So that's a major third. So if I wanted to take this third and I wanted to flat it, come down here to the E flat. So here's E, there's E flat. Well, now we can call that a minor third. All right? So minor means that we have taken the interval that we had and we're going to take that top note and we're just going to flatten it, right? So that we are 1/2 step shorter where we were. We're just the difference between a half step. So this would be 2 whole steps and this would be 1.5 steps is what I'm saying. We're just removing 1/2 step from the equation. We're taking the top note and we're flattening it. And so that would become our minor interval, right? So from a second going down to where it's just C and D flat, that would be a minor interval. That would be a minor second. And from C to E is a major third, but we take that E and flatten it, so C to E flat, so now that's a minor third. So if I've got C to A, which is a sixth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, C to A. I'm going to take that A, I'm going to bring it down. That's a minor sixth. C to A minor. I'm sorry, C to A flat is a minor sixth, right? And C to B flat would be a minor seventh because C to B is a major seventh. All right? So that works with all the major intervals. You can flatten the top note and make them minor intervals. Okay? So here's what the difference sounds like if I play. I'm going to play the major interval and then its minor counterpart. So here's a major second and a minor second. Right? So here's the rest of the major chords or major intervals. And here's the minor counterparts. All right, so that's sort of your introduction to intervals, perfect and major and minor. Now we have these other two, augmented and diminished, and we'll get into them a little bit later. But right now what I wanted to show you is what it looks like on the staff to have these different intervals. All right, so I have written out the different intervals in the key of C. So we've got the major second, and then the major third, and then a major fourth, major fifth, sixth, seventh, and octave. So I wanted you to notice some things about what it looks like on the staff. Okay, a major third, for instance, so is this C and E, and it's a line and then going to the very next line. All right, so if you have two notes that are exactly one line or one space apart, then that is a third of some kind. It's not necessarily a major third, but it could be a third of some kind. The reason it's not necessarily a major third is that if I'm on this E here and I wanted to make it an E flat, well, now I've still got two notes that are on the same lines, or one line apart, like a C and an E, but now I've got this accidental an E flat. So I've dropped that by 1/2 step. So it's not always going to be a a major third, but it will be a third of some kind. And then this will be a second of some kind. And this will be a fourth of some kind. So if it's a line and then skip a line and then go to the next space above that, do you see where I'm getting at? And then we have a fifth and a sixth and a seventh and an octave. And the important thing here is to understand that it's just another visual pattern where you can look at something on sheet music and understand the difference, understand the distance between two notes without having to put too much thought into it. It's really like learning a language, like you learn what the letters sound like, what the syllables sound like. So you're learning what this distance sounds like, first approximately, and then as we go on, you'll learn to refine that. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to get into why we want to know what the intervals are, and how they apply to creating chords, and how they can help you to improve your ear.